Hey Facebook world, this is Ty Perry, and I just wanted to take a couple of minutes here to talk about something that's been on my mind lately as we're dealing with the coronavirus, as we see corruption even at this time in our government, and are dealing with fear probably on an individual basis. I thought I would think about where all this is going and what does all of this have to do with God and the Bible, and is there any hope? And certainly, where does this all come from? You know, back in Genesis chapter 1, Bereshit in the Hebrew Bible, the very first book of the Bible God tells us that the world used to be a very good place. It was a place called paradise. There was a garden there called Eden, place that God placed there, probably in modern day Iraq or in that vicinity. And he created two people. And you likely know this account, Adam and Eve. And Adam and Eve were sinless. That's a theological term. They were sinless. They did not have a sin nature. They didn't rebel against God immediately. We don't know exactly how long it took, but it wasn't very long after their creation that they decided to disobey God, which, by the way, is the definition of sin. When we use that word in the religious world, the word sin is thrown around a lot. Sin means rebellion against God, against his character, as he is this holy, perfect one. And it also means that he is separated from his creation, and that God is the creator. Sin is rebellion against that creator and against his word. And Adam and Eve rebelled against God by eating from one tree in the Garden of Eden that they were told not to. One of my friends, who is not a believer in Jesus, often says, well, that was so cruel of God to put a tree in the Garden of Eden that they couldn't eat from. Well, when you read this text, what you see is there were probably thousands of trees in this garden. And Adam and Eve chose to eat from the one tree they weren't supposed to eat from. Just one. It was a test, and they failed miserably. So they sin. And we find this in Genesis chapter 3. And it's really interesting. Eve is tempted by a serpent. Later on, we know this is Satan, or in Hebrew, they'd say Satan. Satan, or Satan, tempts Eve, and she gives in, and she eats of the fruit, and then Adam eats of the fruit. And after this, God approaches Adam and Eve, and he says, "Where are you?" And Adam admits that he was hiding, he was afraid of God, and God makes some promises. First of all, he makes some promises to Satan, to the serpent, that he is going to crawl in his belly all the rest of his life. But I want to focus in on one promise that he makes to Eve, that God makes to Eve. He makes it to the serpent, to Satan, but it's about Eve. He says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." What is this? This seems kind of obscure when you start reading through Genesis and you think, man, the seed of the woman, and he's going to crush the serpent's head. What does this mean? Well, this word seed means progeny, what's coming later, these generations. And God is telling Satan here, I'm going to put enmity between you and the descendants of this woman. We see that all throughout history, don't we? That there is enmity in the world. What we read about in Genesis of this perfect world, it is so much different from the world we inhabit. Today we have sin, we have disease, we have sickness, we have the coronavirus, we have crime. That wasn't there prior to Genesis chapter 3. But now God says there's going to be enmity between Satan and the woman. There's going to be a conflict between your seed and her seed. And in some translations of the Bible, seed here is capitalized. And there's a reason it's capitalized. It's talking about one specific person called the seed of the woman. And it says that the seed is going to bruise the head of the serpent. and you shall bruise his heel. When I talk about this with people, I always say, which would you rather have, a bruise to the head or a bruise to the heel? And everybody says, well, of course, a bruise to the heel. That's not a fatal thing. In fact, this word bruise, it actually means crush. And so we have a crushed head and a crushed heel. That this seed of the woman is going to crush the head of the serpent, and the serpent's going to crush the heel of this promised seed. Believe it or not, this might seem kind of obscure, but this has everything to do with what we're dealing with in our world today. God has promised that the resulting sin that Adam and Eve brought into the world, it goes to all people. In fact, in Romans chapter 5, in verse 12, God says, through one man, that's Adam, sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned. We are all sinners. And the sin that Adam and Eve committed was like it entered the human bloodstream. And now every single person is a sinner. We all do things that we shouldn't do. We all rebel against God. Nobody does exactly what we're supposed to do. Nobody follows God's word completely. And God says that there is going to come a day when he is going to right this problem of sin. He says that he's going to send someone to destroy, to crush the head of the serpent. But he also says that this serpent is going to crush or bruise this promised seed's heel. This is, I believe, the first instance of what the Bible refers to as the Messiah, the Mashiach. The Messiah is this promised one of God who is going to come and he's going to make all things right. So when we look at the coronavirus today, and we see it not as a good thing, because it's not, it's leading to death. We see sickness and disease, and we say, why do we have this? Well, it comes back to Genesis chapter 3. Sin entered the world, and as a result of sin, we have sicknesses and diseases like the coronavirus, and we have crime, we have murders, we have all of these things that go against God. But God says there's coming one, the seed of the woman, the Messiah, who is going to ultimately destroy Satan and is going to restore the world. And I'm hoping that over the next few days, maybe the next couple of weeks, we can look through the Bible at a couple of stages of this plan that God has. This week, this instance, I just wanted to look at Genesis 3 and how do we explain sin and where it comes from. Next time, though, I want to talk about a very important part of this called the chosen people, the nation of Israel. Believe it or not, they have a lot to do with God's plan of redemption for the entire world. So I hope you'll join me next week. This is just my first try at this. And I say next week, it may even be tomorrow. Who knows? We'll just see, time permitting, when I'm able to release another video. But I hope you'll come back and join me as we look at the Bible and we see how we can make sense of our world, especially in light of this coronavirus, in light of the scriptures. So I hope it's an encouragement to you. So today we learned there's sin, but there's a Redeemer coming. So don't forget that. We're going to pick up with it next time. Until then, shalom and God bless you.